Hey guys, and welcome to Pheas Airsoft, where today I'm going to fit this Mosfet into this JG T3 MC51. Hey guys, and welcome back. So hopefully last week you saw my video where I changed the motor in this T3 MC51 mini G3, whatever you want to call it. This week I've decided I'm still not quite happy, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a little Mosfet into this AEG to see if I can just make it a little bit snappier. Before I do get started though, if you are enjoying my content, please do consider subscribing and liking. It really does help me out a lot. So hopefully you'll have seen my video last week and you saw where I changed the motor from the original to a Tokyo Marui motor. Now, it definitely made an improvement. I'll just remove the battery, the handguard, the battery, to get access to the battery connector. It definitely made an improvement, but I still wasn't 100% happy with what was happening, and I'll show you what I mean. So, plug the battery in and single shot, safety, single shot. It's still a little bit sluggish, and full auto, don't get me wrong, that's a lot better than what it was, but it's still quite sluggish. It's a little bit slow to react. I think that's partly down to the wiring and things. So what I'm going to do is I've picked up an AAB, just a little tiny Mosfet. So this one is just a standard Mosfet with active braking, no special features on it or whatever. I just wanted a bog standard basic Mosfet that was going to help the trigger response be a little bit better and snappier, and help me get a little bit more out of this. So that is the actual Mosfet itself. It is a tiny little thing, and that's it, the whole Mosfet. So what we've got there is a harness for the connection wire to link into, which we'll come to in a second. These are the terminals where the wiring goes out to the motor. These are the terminals that go out to the battery, and that's it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to desolder out the old wiring, solder in this, connect it into there, new wiring down to the motor, and then create a new battery extension wire to go through the body and out to the front there. It shouldn't take too long. Nice easy job relatively, and it gives me a nice little bit of performance improvement. So the Mosfet itself, the reason I've picked this one is because in the back here it's quite limited for space, and once I take this off there is a bit of open area in here, and that's where this will nicely fit. A Murph, which was my initial first choice, would just be too big to go in there, so that's why we've chosen this AAB. Before I get fully into this, just show you just how much room there is. So if I remove this, hopefully you will have seen my downgrade video. If not, I will put a link to it below and possibly a card on the screen right now to link you to the disassembly video that shows you how to do a downgrade and obviously fully disassemble this. So I'll remove these two screws. Remove the end cap. Now, there is, the fuse is in there, which we won't need anymore, but if you look, the actual fuse box itself is smaller than the Mosfet. So this means I'm going to have more than enough room for this to sit in here. We've then also got the wiring connector that comes out of the back of the gearbox, so that's just going to be plain wiring coming out, feeding onto the back of this, and then another wire will connect onto here, which can quite happily go in this, quite a bit of space in there, and the wiring then can feed back into this little gap here and run down the inside of the body and out into the battery compartment. So this should give us significantly better rate of fire at the end of it. So give me 2 seconds and I'll get this stripped down and we'll show you where to go next. So I've got down to the point where I'm now ready to strip open the gearbox, take out the old wiring and put new wiring in. I've stripped away most of the body work purely because I was hoping to split the body in two and feed new wiring down. However, for some reason it seems to be stuck around the middle point, and I don't want to force it. It is only plastic and I don't want to break it. So what I'm going to do is, this is now relatively free moving backwards and forwards. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to snip the connector off the end so I'm not losing too much wire, and when I'm ready to run my new wire in, I'm going to take the new wiring to this and then pull it through backwards so that it pulls through the new wiring and back to the position that I need it, and I can make sure I've got plenty of length on there as well. So I could possibly force the body, but I really don't want to break it. There is, I believe it's around this point here that's sticking. I believe that's stuck together quite firmly. There's not any screws in either side to indicate that it's screwed in. I think the plastic is possibly glued together. I really don't think they want you to split this body apart, but it's fine. I'm at a point where I'm relatively happy that I know what I'm doing. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to dismantle this gearbox, and when I come back in a second I will have desoldered the old wiring out and soldered the new control wire in, and hopefully laid the new wiring down through the gearbox. So I've moved a step forward here, and I just want to show this very carefully to the camera. So obviously I've removed most of the gearbox inner workings and things. I've removed the trigger block and desoldered out the old wiring. So we don't really need this. I'm going to keep it just in case for now. And I've resoldered in the control wire, and what I have done is I've measured out how much roughly I need of the control wire and snipped it to length, so I've got enough sticking out the back that I've got manoeuvrability out the back of the gearbox to attach the Mosfet, but not too much that it's a mess and in the way. And what I've done is I've soldered in this control wire at an angle so it goes down and then out through the track, and then this one is just soldered in flat so that it can go, move that, out through the gearbox. Now what I wanted to specifically show is that right here I've separated the wires, and I've shaped one to go up slightly and one to go flat against the bottom. That's to allow the red wire that's going to have to come down and across to come out the front of the gearbox plenty of room to sit flat so it doesn't get caught by the motor when the motor goes in. And that's quite important. I'll do an update video next week on the CM506 with the Murph in it, where I've had to rewire it with different wiring pretty much for that reason, but more on that next week. So I'm going to run the red wire now and the black wire through, reassemble the gearbox, and then I'll show you where I'm up to and ready to move on. Just a tiny little update then. So as you can see there, I have fed the wires through and I've pre-measured the wires. Now on an M4 the red wire is 14 centimeters and the red wire is about 10.5. Now on this one, on this G3 variant, whatever you want to call it, the red wire is just a tad over 11 centimeters, so I've cut it at just over 11 centimeters. I've done probably about 11, just short of 11.5 centimeters, just to give me that extra little bit of wiggle room. There's plenty of space in that pistol grip for all that wire. And then the black wire is pretty much on the dot, 10 centimeters. So again, I've done it ever so slightly more, just over 10 centimeters, just so I've got a little bit of wiggle room. The wires now fit really nicely and flush in there, so they're not going to get caught by the motor. This perspective doesn't help an awful lot there, but you can rest assured that's not going to get caught. And the wiring sits nicely in the wiring tract coming out the back of the gearbox. So I can reassemble this now and then finish up doing all the other bits and pieces that I need to do. And just as a point, I've just realised I've not said, I am using 18 gauge wire, 18 AWG gauge wire, just because I found the 16, although it's really nice quality, is just too thick, and that's one of the other issues I had with the CM506, but that's in next week's video. So 18 AUG wire or 18 gauge wire is definitely where you should be looking at, because it fits really nicely, nice power flow through it, and really cheap and affordable as well. So back in a second when I've moved on again. So the next update then is I've now got the gearbox back together, and I've put on the little connectors on the end of the wires for the motor. I just need to use my needle nose pliers to turn those 90 degrees to connect on, which I'll sort at the point when I need to put the motor in. The wiring comes out the back. Now the actual Mosfet kit came with the connectors that you need to put the wires into the bits of wiring coming out of the Mosfet. So what I did was I crimped them onto the wires first, and it includes the heat shrink as well. So I put the heat shrinks down the wire and then connected the connectors onto the wire and then plugged them into the Mosfet, and then I put the heat shrink, if you can see there, I've actually shrunk it down over the connectors coming out of the Mosfet. Now the reason I've done that is because it makes sure that there's no cross voltage jumping or anything like that. It keeps the signal the electric in the specific wire itself. I've connected up the control wire, so the next thing I need to do is just run the wiring loom through the gun, through the body, through the receiver, which I'm going to do in a minute. Like I said, I'm going to snip this end off, I'm going to tape two ends of the wire together with this, and I'm going to pull it through, and then I'm going to put the connectors on. Again, they've supplied me with the correct connectors that are all sort of matching in one way or another, so they're not too hard to tell apart and get fitted, and then I should be able to reassemble and test it. Even just partly assembled, I should be able to test it. So I'll be back in a second with the next update. So as you can see, I've moved quite a bit further along now. So I got all the gearbox back into place, I reassembled the lower receiver, put the motor back in and put the wires on. I fed the wiring through. It was quite tricky to get through, but my system worked. I pulled one of the two wires out from the front, I duct taped my new wiring to one of the old wires, and it pulled through really nicely all the way to the back. And then what I did is I made sure I got enough wire first to fit this all into here, and it's going to be a really snug fit. And then obviously crimped on a mini Tamiya. So now, moment of truth. Let's see what it's like. Obviously before it was all right, even with a better motor. It was a bit sluggish. So put the battery in. Mosfet should be powered up now. So moment of truth. Single shot, nothing. Safe, nothing. Single shot. That is definitely a lot snappier than it was. There's a lot less sluggishness there, so it's a lot quicker than full auto. That is much better. Really happy with that. A lot snappier rate of fire, much cleaner, quicker trigger response. It's still not perfect. There's still quite a long trigger pull on it, but that's because of this type of trigger. The contacts are already quite close together, so you're always going to have to give it a good pull to get it to fire. But very happy with it, much happier than I was actually even expecting. That's with the Tokyo Marui motor in it. Really happy. So all that's left to do now is for me to finish reassembling it, and I'll show you once it's back together. So there we have it, fully reassembled, end cap back on, selector in, mag release in, top rail refitted, rear iron sight back installed. The only thing that's not on at the minute is the foregrip, which obviously will go back on, and there it is. Nice, clean, crisp Mosfet installed. Adds a new level of functionality to it all. Really works nice. Dead happy with it. I hope you've enjoyed this. Please do like and subscribe. It does help me out. Thanks a lot. See you next time. Bye.